this isn't a political channel. In fact, I usually try to keep that as far away from here as possible. I use this channel to store whatever dumb ideas happen to pop into my big dumb brain in any given week. But this week, that happens to be something that happens to be political. But let me assure you, the viewer, of the following things. 1. I already know that I'm dumb. 2. I won't discuss any specific political issue, debate, or figure. And 3. I will humiliate myself by video's end. So let's begin. Like any good video on politics, before laying out an idea, we must begin with a hypothesis, which is as follows. People today are, in general, significantly more divided on politics than they were just 20 to 25 years ago. You oftentimes hear people talk about politics by saying that they are actively avoiding talking about politics. Just look at the intro to this video 20 seconds ago. People often bring up politics like they saw a deer wandering through the supermarket. Oh, this guy at my office was talking politics, or my uncle at Thanksgiving. Like they desperately wanted to avoid politics anywhere they weren't expecting it. And for you young people out there, this wasn't really the case just 20 or so years ago. And I know that because back then, I was a bartender. See, a good bartender is like being a black belt in the art of small talk. Someone sits at your bar and you want them to stay, be comfortable enough to drink more, and not be bored. So you have to become adept at reading people and keeping them at least somewhat engaged. But what do you talk about? Well, for that you have to use a bit of common sense. For example, you generally want to avoid talking about the weather because that's boring and not engaging unless you're a weather nerd. Now, this part may surprise you, but politics were fair game. You could talk about issues, candidates, whatever. The one caveat was that there was one issue that you never wanted to bring up. One issue you should always, always, always avoid. And the reason you should avoid it is pretty simple. Because it was and is divisive. Everyone has an opinion on it, most people feel strongly about it, and no one is changing their mind. As far as conversation material goes, it is a powder keg waiting to ignite. So whenever possible, keep as far away from it as possible. And as far as I can tell, the difference between today and 20 years ago is that we are surrounded by powder kegs everywhere we turn. What was once a single issue considered impolite for casual conversation is how we treat politics in general now. Just avoid it, man. Just stay back, man. Hence, why I think we're considerably more divided now than we were in decades past. That's my hypothesis. And the subject of this video and the question my dumbass is trying to answer is, why? For the purposes of trying to answer this, I'll be using the spectrum of left and right, liberal and conservative. And this is the part where some poli-sci nerd goes, politics is infinitely more complex than that? There are several dimensions, which explains why I'm on the center right in the 8th dimensional quadrant as a textile Maoist. But shut up, nerd. I'm talking about large swaths of people, not individuals or pathologies. Anyway, left, right, simple. So to visualize what I'm talking about without conducting any research, 20 years ago from my memory looks roughly like this. Hardly anyone is out on the extremes, most people are in the middle. And since most people are in the middle, it means most people can have relatively civilized conversations. And now, here is my version of what we look like today. Most people are still in the middle, but more people are pushed out at both ends, meaning many more people are much further apart from one another, and thus, no one wants to talk about politics. Because a random selection of any two people encountering each other are much further apart than they were a few decades ago. The result of which being what I described before. Where we once had one single issue that people try to avoid, we now have every issue in politics as a whole. So what you are seeing is people being unable to comprehend each other on a significant scale. The further you go from the center on the spectrum, the more nonsensical the other side becomes, and the louder those people are. So more and more people are incapable of understanding how and why other people form positions on issues, why they gravitate towards certain politicians, parties, or ideologies. But Raiden, you might be thinking in your immensely large and impressive brain that's already subscribed to this channel, didn't you say something about humiliating yourself? And I'll get to that shortly. But let me start by using a simple example from my simple brain to illustrate how what I've described works in reality. And I'll define it using a relatively simple issue. Iran.
Excuse me, what?
No, sorry, what I mean is, I ran. I ran yesterday. I'll run again tomorrow. 3 to 4 times a week, I run downtown and back. Now maybe you hear that I run regularly and you picture something like this, but it's more like this. See, I run, but that doesn't mean I do it well or that I'm in anything that even resembles good shape. I'm a big old fat guy. But whenever I can, usually on my lunch break from work, I try to do something, whatever I can to improve my physical fitness, even if it isn't much. But here's the thing, being a big old fat guy who runs around that frequently means I frequently encounter instances in which people yell something at me from their car, maybe once a month or so. And the things that they yell can, without fail, be classified as one of two things. Number 1, keep it up, you're doing great! Number 2, run, you fat ass! It's always these with little to no variation. Words of encouragement, or calling me a fat ass. Now let's take our political spectrum and apply them here, by placing you're doing great on the left end of the spectrum and run, you fat ass on the right end. And I'm sure none of you will object to that and we're all okay with that, right? No? Well, anyway, that's where they are. Kind and encouraging liberalism versus cruel, mean-spirited conservatism. But let's take a closer look at these statements and what they mean, because something interesting happens when you examine them closely. From the outside, keep it up, you're doing great sounds like some nice words of encouragement to someone trying to better themselves. But it begs the question, why yell anything at all? I don't imagine that when this sort of person sees someone in good physical shape running, that they feel compelled to roll down their window and shout words of encouragement at them. No, they are yelling at me because they see someone who looks like running is not something they find easy or are doing particularly well. So if you think about it, the kind gesture is, in reality, another reminder that I am not in good physical condition. So much so that people look at me and feel they should offer encouragement because I am clearly struggling. In other words, though I am running and run often, I do not look like a runner. I look like someone that needs help or even pity. So while the statement, keep it up, is encouraging, you're doing great is not. Because if I was, in fact, doing great, they would see me as one of the many runners that they pass without saying anything. And the statement, run, you fat ass, which is obviously intended to be cruel, contains more truth than does the encouragement. I am fat, and I do need to run and be in better physical shape. So, in a bizarre way, I almost respect the mean-spirited comment more. No, it isn't nice, but it is honest, and it does more closely resemble truth. Going back to our chart, that doesn't mean I'm saying that the left is nice and the right is true, but that maybe a better way of looking at it would be something like this. Truth is neither nice nor mean. It is what it is. But which end of the spectrum you fall into might be predicated on which you prioritize, whether something is kind or whether it's true. If you value being nice, you will always side with whoever most resembles it, even if it's just empty messaging. You will always reject meanness. But if you value truth, you will gravitate towards those whose messaging more closely resembles what is true, even if they are being cruel or mean in saying it. And that's why I feel like we don't understand each other.
What the fuck are you talking about, man?